Rain hammered against the stained glass windows of Blackthorn Manor. Inside the grand dining hall, 27 guests sat frozen in silence as Duke Adrian Valemont slowly lifted a trembling glass of wine. His empire was at its peak. Power, influence, generational wealth, everything he once dreamed of. Yet at the far end of the table, his ex-wife sat staring at him with tears in her eyes. Not anger, not heartbreak, something worse, pity. Because hidden beneath the Duke's success was a truth capable of destroying the entire dynasty. And before the night was over, someone inside Blackthorn Manor would disappear forever. But the real nightmare started years earlier. The moment Adrian divorced the only woman who truly loved him. For wealth, for power, for a future that would eventually consume him alive. And what happened next shocked even the inner circle of the dynasty. The storm outside Blackthorn Manor intensified. Rain slid down the towering stained glass windows like tears crawling across forgotten faces. Inside the dining hall, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The sound of silver utensils against porcelain had stopped nearly 5 minutes earlier. Even the servants stood frozen beside the walls. Because something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. At the center of the enormous table, Duke Adrian Valemont stared silently into his wine glass while candlelight flickered across his face. To the public, he looked untouchable. A man who conquered failure. A man who rebuilt a dying dynasty into one of the most powerful aristocratic empires in the country. But appearances inside Blackthorn Manor had always been dangerous. Especially on nights like this. Across from him sat ministers, investors, royal associates, and members of elite families who spent years trying to gain Adrian's favor. Yet despite the luxury surrounding them, fear had quietly entered the room. Because moments earlier, one of the dinner guests asked a simple question. Do you ever regret divorcing Eleanor? The entire hall went silent. No one expected the question. And no one expected Adrian's reaction. Because for the first time in years, the Duke looked afraid. Not angry. Not insulted. Afraid. As though the mention of Eleanor Whitmore had awakened something he spent years trying to bury. Then, at the far end of the table, a glass shattered. Every head turned instantly. One of the servants stood trembling beside Eleanor herself. Alive. Present. Sitting silently among the guests. Some swore she had not been there seconds earlier. Others insisted she arrived before dinner began. Nobody could agree. And somehow, that made the atmosphere worse. Eleanor wore black. Simple. Elegant. No jewelry. No visible emotion. Only those eyes fixed directly on Adrian. Eyes that seemed to know something nobody else in the room understood yet. Then Eleanor slowly spoke. Her voice barely louder than the storm outside. You should tell them what happened in the East Wing. The color drained from Adrian's face. Several guests exchanged nervous glances immediately. Because the East Wing of Blackthorn Manor was never discussed publicly. Not after what happened there years ago. Adrian stood slowly from his chair. His hands trembled slightly against the table. Leave, he whispered to Eleanor. But she didn't move. Instead, she reached into her handbag and placed an old brass key onto the dining table. The sound echoed through the hall like a gunshot. Some guests instantly recognized the symbol engraved into the metal. The Valemont family crest. A crest connected to secrets buried for generations. And suddenly, people wanted to leave the dinner. But nobody dared stand first. Then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room completely. Several guests screamed. Thunder exploded above the manor. And somewhere deep inside Blackthorn Manor, a piano began playing. Slowly. Deliberately. One note at a time. The exact same melody Adrian's mother used to play before her mysterious death 23 years earlier. A death officially ruled an accident. But according to old servants, the Duchess had been terrified during the final weeks of her life. Terrified of someone inside the manor. When the backup lights finally returned, one chair was empty. Eleanor was gone. Only the brass key remained on the table. And beside it, a folded handwritten note. Adrian grabbed it before anyone else could read it. But one sentence was already visible. She knows what really happened that winter night. The Duke's breathing changed instantly. Heavy. Uneven. And for the first time in decades, the most powerful man in Blackthorn Manor looked like a man losing control. Because there was only one winter night the note could be referring to. The night Adrian's father sealed the East Wing forever. The night a young servant vanished without explanation. The night Eleanor discovered something she was never supposed to see. And the terrifying part was that Adrian himself never learned the full truth about what happened there. Not completely. Not until much later. But before this night ended, another person inside Blackthorn Manor would vanish. And this disappearance would expose a chain of secrets powerful enough to destroy the Valemont dynasty forever. Because hidden beneath the wealth, beneath the titles, beneath the grand halls and political influence, Blackthorn Manor had been protecting something for decades. Something connected to Adrian's father. Something connected to Vivian Laurent. And something connected to Eleanor in ways nobody yet understood. But perhaps the most disturbing detail of all was this. Eleanor Whitmore had not come back to Blackthorn Manor to seek revenge. She came back to warn them. Because according to the final letter she received before arriving that night, someone inside the manor was about to die. And the killer was already sitting at the dinner table. The silence behind the dining hall doors stretched too long. No knock. No sound of urgency. Just stillness. Then, a single slow creak. Not of wood bending, but of metal releasing. The lock had not been forced. It had disengaged on its own. Every guest in the room noticed at the same time. No one spoke. No one breathed normally. Even Adrian's hand stopped halfway toward the table. Eleanor did not move. She simply watched the door, as if she already knew what would enter. Then the doors opened, slowly. Not pushed, not pulled, but separated. Like something was deciding to reveal itself rather than arrive. A servant stood in the doorway, but not one anyone recognized. No uniform, no badge, no expression of panic. Only stillness, and something folded in their hands. A second document, older than the one on the table. The servant took one step inside, then stopped. Their eyes locked on Adrian. Not the guest. Not Eleanor. Only Adrian. And in a voice so quiet it barely reached the table, they said, "It was not supposed to be opened tonight." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Who sent you?" No answer. Only the sound of paper being placed gently onto the floor. Then the servant stepped back, into the hallway, and disappeared. Not walking away. Not running. Just gone. As if they had never been there at all. A few guests stood immediately. What just happened? Who was that? This is not normal security protocol. But Adrian was already moving. Not toward the door. Toward the second document. The one now resting on the floor between him and the exit. Eleanor's voice cut through the room again. "Don't touch that one yet." Adrian froze. For the first time that night. He looked directly at her. "What do you know?" Eleanor's expression did not change. But her answer came slower this time. Carefully measured. Enough to know that the east wing was never closed to protect the house. Pause. "It was closed to protect you." The room reacted instantly. Confusion. Unease. Shifting whispers. But Adrian felt none of it. Because the words hit something deeper than thought. Something buried. Something he had avoided naming for years. From outside the room, a low mechanical sound echoed through the manor walls. Not footsteps this time. Not movement. Something heavier. Like a mechanism engaging deep beneath the estate. A system waking up. The candlelight flickered violently. One by one, the guests turned toward the table again. The first document still lay beneath the candle, untouched. And now, it was vibrating slightly. Not from wind. Not from impact. But from something beneath the manor reacting to it. Adrian finally stepped forward. Slow. Controlled. Each step heavier than the last. Eleanor did not stop him this time. Because she knew. This moment had already passed the point of prevention. Adrian bent down. And picked up the document. The moment his fingers touched it, the room temperature dropped. Not noticeably at first. But enough for every guest to feel it at once. A shared discomfort. A collective awareness. Adrian unfolded the paper. The ink was old. Faded. But still readable. And the first line was enough to change his breathing instantly. "If this record is exposed, the Valemont lineage will collapse within 7 days." A silence followed. Not confusion now. Understanding forming too late. Adrian turned the page. His face tightened. Then went still. Because beneath the statement was a signature. His father's. And beneath that, a second signature. One he did not recognize. But Eleanor did. Because her voice, when it came, was quieter than before. Almost careful. "That's not a signature," she said. "That's authorization." Adrian's eyes lifted sharply. Authorization for what? Eleanor did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the sealed doors again. And said only one thing. "They're not here for the secret anymore." Pause. "They're here for what the secret was used to build." And at that exact moment, The second document on the floor began to unfold itself, without anyone touching it. The second document did not open like paper normally should. It unfolded slowly, deliberately, as if an invisible hand was revealing it line by line. No one in the room moved, not because they were calm, but because movement felt like the wrong decision in a place where reality itself no longer followed normal rules. Adrian's eyes locked onto it. The ink was darker than the first document, newer, and yet it carried the same family seal, the Valemont crest, pressed into the bottom corner like a warning that had been stamped into history itself. Eleanor's voice broke the silence again. "Don't look at the last page." Adrian ignored her. He always did. That was the pattern that brought him here. Power had trained him to move forward even when instinct warned him to stop. He flipped the page, and immediately, the lights in the dining hall dimmed again. Not flickered, not failed, dim. Like something had intentionally reduced visibility. The guests began to murmur in confusion, but Adrian didn't hear them anymore, because what he was reading was not a contract, not a letter, not even a record. It was an admission, a legal record of something that should never have existed inside a noble lineage, a transaction between his father and the Lauron family. His expression tightened, then stopped moving entirely. Eleanor saw it instantly. The moment realization crossed the line from confusion into understanding, and she spoke softly. "You see it now." But Adrian didn't respond, because the document was still unfolding, still revealing more text that had not been visible before, as if it was reacting to his attention. New lines appearing where there had been blank space seconds earlier. A senior guest stood abruptly. "This is impossible, paper doesn't." The word stopped mid-sentence, because the edges of the document had begun to darken. Not burn, not tear, darken, like ink spreading through time itself. From outside the dining hall, a deep mechanical hum echoed through the walls. Not loud, but structured, rhythmic, intentional. Eleanor slowly stood now. For the first time her composure shifted. Not fear, not panic, but urgency. "We need to leave this room," she said firmly. A few guests moved toward the doors instantly, but the doors did not respond. They were no longer locked. They were sealed. No handle movement. No resistance. Just immovable silence. One guest slammed their shoulder into it. "Nothing." Again. "Nothing." Adrian finally looked up from the document. "Security," he shouted. His voice echoed. But the manor did not answer. It never did. Because Blackthorn Manor had never been designed to respond to panic. Only to control it. The second document finally stopped unfolding. And what it revealed made even Eleanor step back. Not dramatically, just enough. Because the final page was not written like the others. It was stamped. Multiple times. Same seal. Same authority. But underneath the seals was something far worse. A list. Names. Not guests. Not servants. Not officials. Names of people who had once been part of the Valemont family's inner circle. Crossed out. One by one. Adrian's breathing slowed, because he recognized one of them. A man who had died years ago. Officially from natural causes. But here. His name was marked with a single annotation. Removed after East Wing activation. The words hit the room differently. Not loudly, but permanently. Eleanor's voice dropped. "That's what I tried to warn you about." Adrian finally looked at her. "What is the East Wing?" But before she could answer, a sound came from beneath the dining hall floor. Not a creak. Not movement. Something heavier. Like a structure shifting under pressure. The chandeliers above began to sway slightly. Not from wind. From vibration rising upward. The guests grabbed the table instinctively. Eleanor did not. She was looking at the floor now, as if listening to something only she could understand. Then she said it, quietly, but clearly enough for everyone to hear. "It's not a room." Pause. "It's a containment." The word changed the atmosphere instantly. Containment implies something is inside. Something that should not leave. Adrian stepped forward. Containment of what? Eleanor's eyes finally lifted. And for the first time that night, there was no ambiguity in her voice. Of everything your family built that was never supposed to survive exposure. The second document on the table shifted slightly again. Not unfolding now, but vibrating. And somewhere deep inside Blackthorn Manor, a lock that had remained closed for decades, clicked once. Not opening. Not yet. Just acknowledging that it had been heard. The sound from beneath the manor did not repeat. It did not need to. One single click was enough to change the entire structure of Blackthorn Manor, because every guest in the dining hall felt it at the same time. A subtle shift under their feet, like the building had exhaled for the first time in years. Adrian noticed it immediately. His hand tightened on the edge of the table. What did that mean? He asked. Eleanor did not answer right away. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor. Not the guest. Not Adrian. The floor. As if she was tracking something moving beneath layers of stone and history. Then she spoke. It means it heard you. A murmur spread through the room. One of the guests stood abruptly. This is insane. There's nothing under this house except foundation. Eleanor finally looked up at him, and her expression stopped him mid-breath. There is more under this house than anyone in this room was ever allowed to map. Silence returned instantly. Not forced. Adrian stepped away from the table now. Slowly. Measured. Then show me, he said. Eleanor hesitated. Not because she didn't know, but because she knew what showing him would cost. Then she spoke one sentence that changed the direction of everything. The East Wing is not where it started. Pause. It's where it was buried. Before anyone could react, the second document on the table folded itself again. Not violently. Not suddenly. But precisely. Like something correcting its own position. And when it stopped moving, a new line had appeared at the bottom of the page. One that had not been there before. Second seal identified. The room reacted instantly. What second seal? Someone shouted. But Eleanor had already stepped forward. Her voice lower now. Tighter. There's more than one layer to this. Adrian turned sharply. More than one layer of what? Eleanor's answer came slower this time. Because now she was choosing words carefully. Of what your family locked away. A distant sound echoed through the manor again. This time not beneath them, but inside the walls. A faint cracking sound. Like old stone adjusting under pressure it was never meant to feel again. Then, the lights flickered. Once, twice, and held. But the shadows in the room changed again. This time not drifting. Not misaligned. But multiplying. As if each person in the room now had more than one shadow. Guests began to panic. A chair scraped loudly as someone tried to stand, but stopped mid-motion, because the table itself had begun to vibrate. Not violently, but rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Adrian looked down, then froze, because the second document was no longer on the table. It was beneath it, pressed against the surface from below, as if something under the manor had moved it through solid wood. Eleanor saw it too, and her voice sharpened. Everyone away from the table. Too late. A deep sound rolled through the structure. Not an explosion. Not collapse. Something opening. Far beneath them. A slow mechanical release. The dining hall doors shook slightly. Not unlocking. Not breaking. Responding. Adrian took a step back. What is that? He asked. Eleanor finally looked at him directly. And this time, there was no hesitation. No one is supposed to hear it. Another pause. Not until all seals are aligned. A guest near the window suddenly pointed outside. There, look. Everyone turned. For a brief second. The storm outside Blackthorn Manor stopped completely. Rain froze in midair. Lightning paused in the sky. Even the wind disappeared. Like time itself had been interrupted. Then, the frozen moment broke. And the manor shook. Not violently enough to destroy it, but precisely enough to confirm one thing. Something below the estate had fully awakened. The second document on the table shot upward suddenly, and slammed back down flat. The final page turned itself. No hands, no force, just inevitability. And what it revealed made Eleanor step back again. Not fear, but recognition. Because there, written in identical Valemont seal language, was a single line. Primary containment compromised. Adrian stared at it, slowly. What does that mean? He asked again. Eleanor's voice dropped to almost nothing. It means the East Wing is no longer holding what it was built to hold. A silence followed. Heavier than before. Finalier than before. And then, from somewhere beneath Blackthorn Manor, something moved again. But this time, it moved closer. The second movement beneath Blackthorn Manor was not like the first. The first had been a signal. The second felt like intent. Every guest in the dining hall felt it through their shoes. Not vibration. Not shaking. But pressure. As if the ground itself had started to press upward, testing limits it had never tested before. Adrian stepped back from the table. Slowly. Not in panic. In calculation. His eyes scanned the room. The guests. The exits. the document still lying beneath the table surface. Then, a sound came from the walls. Not from below this time. From all directions at once. A low, continuous tone. Like a system powering up after years of silence. Eleanor's head tilted slightly. She was listening now. Not reacting. Listening. And then she said it. Quietly. It's transitioning. Adrian turned sharply. Transitioning into what? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. Because the answer wasn't something she wanted to say out loud. The chandeliers above began to sway again. Not randomly this time. In rhythm. Matching the sound in the walls. A synchronized pattern forming without permission. One of the guests backed away from the table. This is not possible, he muttered. This is structural failure. This is gas. This is... He stopped. Because the table began to rise slightly. Not breaking. Not lifting dramatically. Just separating from the floor by a fraction of an inch. As if something beneath it had decided it no longer needed it attached. Adrian's voice dropped. Everyone away from the table. Now. But Eleanor spoke again immediately. No. That single word froze the room more effectively than fear. Adrian turned to her. What do you mean no? Eleanor's eyes stayed on the table. Moving won't help. Pause. Then. It's already mapped the room. Silence. No one asked what it was anymore. Because the word no longer mattered. The room itself was becoming the subject. The second document beneath the table began to glow faintly at the edges. Not fire. Not light. Something in between. Like ink remembering it was once active. Adrian stepped forward again. Against instinct. Against warning. He placed his hand on the table surface. Eleanor's voice sharpened instantly. Don't. Too late. The moment his palm made contact. The entire dining hall went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Even the sound from the walls disappeared. Even the chandeliers stopped moving. Even breathing felt suspended. Adrian froze. His hand still pressed against the table. And then, he felt it. Not through sound. Not through sight. Through structure. Something beneath the manor responded directly to him. Not the room. Not the building. Him. His expression changed slightly. Eleanor saw it immediately. And for the first time that night. Her voice softened. Adrian, take your hand off the table. He didn't move. Because something was happening through the contact. A sensation like recognition. Like the manor had identified him as part of its internal system. One of the guests whispered. What is happening to him? Adrian's eyes narrowed. Because now he could see something no one else could. Faint lines appearing across the surface of the table. Not cracks. Not damage. Markings. Like a hidden map surfacing under pressure. Eleanor stepped forward quickly now. Stop focusing on it, she said. You're triggering alignment. Adrian finally pulled his hand back. Immediately. The silence broke. The sound returned. But changed. Deeper. Closer. As if whatever was beneath them had now adjusted to his presence. The second document under the table slid out slowly. Not falling. Sliding. Until it rested fully in view again. Open. The final page was now visible to everyone. And every guest leaned back instinctively when they saw it. Because the page was no longer paper. It was structure. Lines. Coordinates. A full architectural overlay of Blackthorn Manor. With something massive drawn beneath it. A sealed chamber. Labeled clearly. Core containment node. One guest whispered. That's impossible, there's no substructure like that in any official record. Eleanor responded immediately. That's because official records were never allowed to include it. Adrian stared at the diagram. Slowly. What is inside it? Eleanor didn't answer right away. Because the sound in the walls had stopped again. Completely. And that was worse. Then she said it. Soft. Controlled. But final. Everything your family used to build, everything you see above you. Pause. And everything they promised would never wake up again. From directly beneath the dining hall. A new sound began. Not mechanical. Not structural. Something older. Like a deep breath taken after a long silence. And this time, the floor didn't just vibrate. Cracked. A thin line appeared across the marble. Perfectly straight. Running directly through the center of the table. And underneath it, something began to rise. The line across the marble floor did not widen like a normal fracture. It expanded with intent. Perfectly straight. Perfectly controlled. As if the stone itself was being opened rather than broken. Adrian stepped back immediately. So did the guests. Chairs scraped. Utensils fell. But none of it mattered anymore. Because the dining hall floor was no longer behaving like a surface. It was behaving like a lid. Eleanor's voice came sharply through the rising tension. Everyone away from the center now. No one argued this time. Not because they obeyed her, but because instinct finally agreed with her. Another crack formed. Then another. Until a precise geometric pattern spread across the entire floor beneath the table. Not random. Designed. Measured. Adrian stared at it. His voice lowered. This isn't collapse. Eleanor answered without looking at him. No. Pause. It's unlocking. The moment she said it, the marble shifted downward slightly. Just a few centimeters. Enough to make the entire structure of the room feel unstable. Like the foundation had decided it was no longer required. A deep sound rolled up from beneath. Not mechanical. Not natural. Something in between both states. The chandeliers above trembled violently. Guests screamed and moved toward the walls. But the walls themselves had begun to respond with faint vibrations. Like the entire manor had become aware of pressure building beneath it. Adrian looked down at the crack. And then, the second document on the table disappeared. Not slid. Not lifted. Vanished. Eleanor noticed instantly. Her eyes widened slightly. That's not supposed to happen yet. Adrian turned sharply. What do you mean not yet? But Eleanor was already moving. Toward the center of the room. Toward the table. Toward the crack. Eleanor, stop. Adrian called out. But she didn't. Because something beneath the manor had already begun responding differently. Not to fear. Not to noise. To alignment. The floor cracked again. This time louder. And a section of marble near the table dropped inward slightly, revealing darkness beneath. Not empty space. Depth. Structured depth. Like a chamber carved with purpose. A gust of cold air rose through the opening. Too precise to be natural. One guest collapsed against the wall. This is underground engineering, this is decades old. But his voice trailed off. Because what he was seeing did not match any known construction method. Eleanor stopped at the edge of the crack. Looked down. And for a moment, she went completely still. Adrian stepped closer. What is it? Eleanor's voice came quietly. But it was different now. Less controlled. More certain. They're awake earlier than expected. Adrian frowned. Who is awake? Eleanor finally looked at him. And what she said next removed any remaining illusion that this was still about a family secret. It's not who, she said. It's what was stored here. The floor beneath them dropped again. Another section opened. More of the chamber below revealed itself. And now, there was light. Not artificial. Not electrical. A faint, shifting glow rising from deep underground. The guests backed away further. But Adrian couldn't. Because something about the light felt familiar. Not visually. Emotionally. Like recognition without memory. Eleanor stepped back quickly. Don't look directly into it, she warned. Adrian ignored her. He always did when answers were close. He stepped to the edge. Looked down. And what he saw made his breathing stop. Below Blackthorn Manor was not a single chamber. It was a system. A network of connected halls extending beyond sight. And at the center of it, something large and inactive. Beginning to respond. Slowly. Not waking. Reacting. The light intensified slightly. And in that glow, Adrian saw markings on the structure. Not modern. Not even historical. Something older than both. Eleanor's voice dropped. That's why the east wing was sealed. Pause. That's the access point. Adrian turned sharply. To what? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. Because the sound beneath them changed again. The breathing returned. But closer now. Much closer. And this time, it felt like it was coming upward. The breath did not rise again immediately. Instead it paused. As if whatever lay beneath Blackthorn Manor had become aware of being noticed. That silence was worse than the sound. Because it suggested awareness. Eleanor stepped back from the edge of the opening. Slowly. Carefully. Like someone retreating from something that had already seen her. Adrian remained closer to the gap than anyone else. His eyes fixed on the illuminated structure below. The glowing system was no longer still. It was shifting. Not fully moving. But adjusting. Like a machine aligning itself after centuries of dormancy. One of the guests whispered from behind. That's not a basement. No one corrected him. Because even the word basement felt too small now. Adrian spoke quietly. What is it reacting to? Eleanor answered without hesitation. You. That single word landed heavily. Adrian turned. What do you mean me? Eleanor's expression tightened slightly. Everything down there was built to respond to lineage markers. Pause. And you are the last direct activation point. The structure beneath them emitted a low pulse. Not sound. Not vibration. Something deeper. A pressure wave felt in the bones. The chandeliers above trembled again, but this time in response to the pulse below. A synchronization forming between levels of the manor. Upper and lower. Surface and containment. Adrian took a slow step back from the edge. Then another. His voice lowered. My father never mentioned anything like this. Eleanor's eyes didn't leave the opening. He wouldn't have. Pause. Because if you knew what you were born into, you would never have been allowed to leave this house. From deep below. A second pulse answered. Stronger. Closer. More defined. The guests began to panic fully now. Some moved toward the doors again. But the doors did not respond. Not locked. Not sealed. Ignored. As if the room itself had stopped recognizing exits as valid. Adrian turned toward the hall entrance. Open the doors. A servant rushed forward and tried the handle again. Nothing. Then again. Nothing. The servant stepped back, shaken. They're not locked, they're just not responding. Eleanor finally turned toward Adrian. And her voice changed. Not louder. Not sharper. But final. This is what I tried to prevent. Adrian frowned. You knew this would happen? Eleanor hesitated. Not long. Just enough. Yes. That confirmation changed everything in the room. Adrian's expression hardened. You let me bring this here anyway? Eleanor stepped closer now. No. Pause. You brought it here the moment you signed the Loran agreement. The floor beneath them pulsed again. This time stronger. A visible ripple passed through the cracked marble. And the glow from below intensified sharply. One of the guests shouted. Something is coming up. And for the first time, everyone saw it. A shape. Not fully formed. Not fully visible. But rising through the illuminated structure beneath the manor. Slow. Controlled. As if ascending through layers that had held it for decades. Adrian stepped closer despite Eleanor's warning. What is that? Eleanor's voice dropped almost to nothing. I don't think it has a name anymore. The shape rose further. And as it did, the markings on the structure began to respond. Lines lighting up in sequence. One after another. Like a system recognizing completion. The chamber beneath Blackthorn Manor was not collapsing. It was activating. And Adrian suddenly understood something that made his stomach tighten. This wasn't built under the manor. He whispered. It was built through it. Eleanor nodded once. Yes. Pause. Blackthorn Manor is not the structure. Another pulse echoed upward. Louder. Clear. Closer. It's the seal. And then, from deep below the opening, something finally responded directly. Not sound. Not vibration. But a presence acknowledging them. And the entire dining hall lights went out at once. The blackout was not gradual. It was immediate. Absolute. Every source of light inside Blackthorn Manor disappeared at once, as if the building had decided illumination was no longer permitted. No candles. No emergency lamps. No glow from outside. Only darkness. But it wasn't empty darkness. Because something remained visible below the floor. That faint, unnatural glow from the chamber beneath the manor still seeped upward through the cracks. And now, it was brighter. Adrian stood motionless. Not because he was calm. But because movement no longer felt like it belonged in the same reality. Eleanor's voice came from somewhere nearby in the dark. Controlled. Careful. We don't move until we know what it's responding to. A guest's voice broke instantly. What is it responding to? There's nothing here except. The sentence stopped. Because a new sound emerged from below. Not a pulse. Not a vibration. A structured tone. Like something forming communication without language. The glow beneath the floor shifted. Patterns began to form inside it. Not random. Directional. Intentional. And then, Adrian heard something that made his breath tighten. His name. Not spoken by a voice. Not echoed by a person. But recognized. From below. The structure had identified him. One of the guests stepped backward slowly. This is impossible, sound can't travel like that through. He stopped again. Because the floor beneath his feet answered him. A soft, delayed resonance. Like a reply. Eleanor moved closer to Adrian in the dark. Her voice dropped lower than before. It's mapping presence. Adrian turned toward her voice. Mapping what? Before she could answer, a thin line of light shot upward through the crack in the floor. Straight. Precise. It extended toward the ceiling like a vertical marker. Then another appeared. And another. Until the dining hall was no longer dark. It was segmented. Measured. Divided into invisible coordinates now revealed by light. The room itself was being scanned. Not visually. Structurally. One guest screamed as the line passed through their position. But nothing touched them. No heat. No pressure. Only recognition. Eleanor stepped back immediately. Everyone away from the lines. Too late for some. The light lines adjusted slightly. Repositioning themselves. As if correcting an error. Adrian watched, his voice barely audible. This isn't random. Eleanor shook her head. No. Pause. It's calibrating the surface before full emergence. The word emergence changed the air. Because it implied something already existed below. Not forming. Not arriving. But returning. The glow beneath the floor intensified again. And this time, the shape became clearer. Not fully visible. But undeniable. A large structure moving upward through the illuminated chamber. Slow. Heavy. And aware. Adrian stepped forward instinctively. Eleanor grabbed his arm immediately. Don't get closer. He looked at her. Why not? Her expression finally shifted. Not fear. Not panic. But urgency sharpened into warning. Because it's not just mapping the room anymore. Pause. It's mapping you. As if responding to her words. The light lines inside the room shifted direction. Every single one. All converging toward Adrian. The guest reacted instantly. Why is it pointing at him? What did he do? This is insane. But Eleanor didn't look away from Adrian. Because she understood something no one else had yet accepted. This is not the first time it has seen you, she said quietly. Adrian froze. What are you talking about? Eleanor hesitated for a fraction longer than before. Then said it. Your lineage was used as a key long before you were born. The glow beneath the floor surged upward again. Stronger this time. And for the first time. The structure below produced something that sounded almost like a response. Not words. Not language. A resonance shaped like recognition. And the entire dining hall shook slightly. Not collapsing. Not breaking. Opening. The word opening did not come from any voice. It came from the structure itself. Not spoken. Not translated. But understood. A deep mechanical resonance traveled through Blackthorn Manor, rising through stone, wood, and steel like a decision being finalized. The chandeliers above swayed again. Not from instability. But synchronization. As if the entire manor had agreed to participate in what was happening below. Adrian stood frozen at the center of the shifting light lines. Every line in the room still pointed toward him. Not following movement. Following identity. Eleanor's grip on his arm tightened briefly. Then released. Not because she let go. But because she realized it was no longer useful to hold him back. It's past containment, she said quietly. A guest near the wall shouted, We need to get out of here. But the doors still did not respond. They had become irrelevant. The structure beneath them had taken priority over everything above it. Another pulse rose from below. Stronger. The floor cracked further. And this time, the cracks did not stop at marble. They extended into the architecture itself. Walls. Ceiling joints. Support beams. The entire manor began revealing a hidden alignment system. Lines of faint light appeared inside the walls. Not decoration. Not electricity. A blueprint coming alive. One of the guests whispered in disbelief. This building was designed around something. Eleanor answered without looking at them. Yes. Pause. And not built on it. Adrian's voice came low. Built around what? Eleanor finally looked at him. And this time, there was no hesitation left in her answer. A sealed system that was never meant to reach full activation. The structure beneath the floor responded again. But differently now. Not with pressure. Not with light. With structure shift. The central section of the dining hall floor sank slightly again. Deeper than before. And this time, the glow beneath was no longer distant. It was close enough to cast shadows upward. Real shadows. Sure. Moving. A shape inside the chamber rose higher. Now visible enough for every person in the room to understand one thing. It was not a machine. It was not architecture. It was something built into architecture. A presence bound into form. One of the guests stumbled back. No, this is not possible engineering. But their voice broke off when the lines of light in the room suddenly shifted again. Now forming a complete circle. Centered entirely on Adrian. Eleanor stepped fully in front of him. Don't let it lock onto you completely, she said urgently. Adrian frowned. It already has. Pause. Because he realized something he had been avoiding. Every reaction below. Every response. Every adjustment. It was not random. It was responding faster whenever he spoke. Or moved. Or focused. Like a system refining input. Eleanor's voice lowered. It's trying to complete recognition. Adrian looked down into the opening. The glow was now intense enough that the chamber beneath was partially visible. And within it, something large shifted again. Closer. Heavier. And then, a sound came from below. Not mechanical. Not organic. But structured like a memory being activated. And for the first time, it responded with something that resembled a directive. Not to the room. Not to the guests. Only to Adrian. The light lines tightened slightly. The entire manor seemed to inhale. Eleanor whispered, almost to herself. It's opening the secondary seal. Adrian turned sharply. Secondary seal? She nodded once. The one your father never told you about. Pause. The one that requires you to complete it. The glow beneath the floor surged upward violently for a second. Then stabilized. As if waiting. Not attacking. Waiting. And in that moment, Adrian finally understood something that made his expression change completely. This doesn't wake up on its own, he said slowly. It needs permission. Eleanor did not deny it. And that silence was worse than confirmation. Because it meant one thing. The structure beneath Blackthorn Manor was not just reacting to him. It was waiting for him to finish what his family started. And the moment that realization settled, the entire room dimmed again. Not because power failed, but because something below had begun preparing for final alignment. The darkness returned, but it did not behave like before. It was no longer absent. It was controlled. The light lines across the room held steady for a moment longer, then slowly began to retract. Not disappearing. Returning. Sliding back toward the center of the chamber beneath the floor. Like a system withdrawing diagnostics after confirmation. Eleanor noticed it instantly. Her voice dropped. It's consolidating. Adrian didn't look away from the opening. Consolidating what? But he already knew the answer was not going to be simple. From below, the structure shifted again. This time there was no slow approach. No measured rise. A sudden adjustment. Like something inside had changed posture. The entire dining hall responded with a low, unified tremor. Guests stumbled backward, grabbing walls, chairs, anything stable enough to hold them in place. But stability was becoming meaningless. The manor was no longer a room. It was a system responding to activation. Eleanor stepped closer to Adrian again. Not to protect him now, but to stay within reach of what he was about to trigger. Adrian, she said quietly, listen to me. He finally looked at her. For the first time that night, his expression was no longer defensive. It was focused. What is it waiting for? He asked. Eleanor hesitated, then answered in a voice that carried far more weight than before. You. Pause. To confirm inheritance. The word inheritance did not sound like wealth anymore. It sounded like access. The structure beneath the floor responded again. A deeper resonance this time. Not rising, but expanding outward. The cracks in the floor widened slightly, forming a precise circular pattern around the center of the room. A boundary. One that now enclosed Adrian without physically touching him. One of the guests screamed, "It's forming a perimeter." But Eleanor didn't move her eyes from Adrian. Don't step out of it, she said sharply. Adrian frowned. Why? Eleanor's voice lowered again. Because it will restart calibration if you break alignment. The circle of light tightened. Not physically, visually. As if the space itself was becoming more defined. From below, a new sound emerged. Not a pulse. Not a vibration. A structured sequence. Like language forming without sound. The guests fell silent again. Because even without understanding it, they felt it was directed. The chamber beneath the manor began to rise further. Not physically breaking through the floor, but revealing more of itself through the opening. Layer by layer. Structure after structure. A complex system embedded deep beneath Blackthorn Manor began unfolding into visibility. And at the center of it, something began to take shape. Not fully visible yet, but undeniably present. Eleanor's hand tightened slightly at her side. This is the final sequence, she said. Adrian's eyes narrowed. What happens when it finishes? Eleanor looked at him directly. And for the first time, her answer was absolute. Then the manor stops being a seal. Pause. And becomes a gateway. The chamber below emitted one final structured resonance. And every light line in the room converged at once. Not randomly. Not gradually. Instantly. All pointing at Adrian. The entire system had completed alignment. And in that moment, the structure beneath Blackthorn Manor responded with a final acknowledgement. Not sound. Not vibration. But certainty. And the floor beneath Adrian's feet began to glow. The glow beneath Adrian's feet did not spread. It focused. A single point of light, centered exactly where he stood, as if the floor had finally decided where reality should be anchored. Eleanor's voice sharpened immediately. Don't move. Adrian didn't. Not because he obeyed, but because something in the floor was already reacting to his presence. Any movement now felt negotiated. The guests pressed themselves against the walls, afraid even their breathing might trigger another response. The light beneath Adrian intensified slightly, then stabilized, as if waiting for a second confirmation. From below, the chamber responded with a deep, structured resonance again. Not louder. More precise. Each pulse now separated by exact intervals. Like a system verifying identity. Eleanor stepped half a pace closer. Her voice lowered. It's done mapping everyone else. Adrian glanced toward her. What does that mean? Eleanor hesitated for the briefest moment. Then answered. It means you're the only variable left. The words hung in the air longer than sound should have allowed. Adrian looked down again. And this time he noticed something he hadn't seen before. The light beneath him was no longer random. It was forming a pattern. Not a symbol. Not a shape. A sequence. Like instructions written in illumination. The floor around him began to separate slightly along those lines. Not collapsing. Not breaking. Reconfiguring. One of the guests whispered, barely audible. It's opening directly under him. Another backed away toward the wall. This is where it ends, this is where it all ends. But Eleanor cut through the rising panic. No. Pause. This is where it starts again. Adrian turned sharply. What are you talking about? Eleanor's eyes never left the glowing pattern beneath him. Because now it was changing faster. Responding to his attention. It doesn't just unlock the structure, she said quietly. It finalizes ownership. The word ownership landed differently now. Not wealth. Not property. Something far more absolute. The chamber below responded with a new tone. Short. Final. A confirmation sound. And the entire dining hall reacted. The walls vibrated once cleanly. The chandeliers stopped swaying entirely. Even the distant storm outside the manor seemed to pause again. Like the world was holding its breath for permission. Adrian's voice dropped. Permission for what? Eleanor finally looked at him fully. And what she said next removed any remaining illusion of control. For it to recognize you as the last air interface. Pause. And open everything your family buried inside it. The glow beneath Adrian expanded slightly now. Not outward. Downward. As if the floor itself had become transparent in layers. And beneath it, something massive shifted again. Closer than before. Heavier than before. No longer rising cautiously. Now responding fully. Adrian's breathing slowed. Not from calm. From realization building too quickly to resist. This isn't just a secret, he said quietly. Eleanor nodded once. No. Pause. It's a system that was never meant to remain sealed without a living key. Adrian looked down at the light again. And for the first time, he understood the implication. His voice dropped. So if I'm the key. Eleanor didn't interrupt. He finished the thought himself. Then opening it doesn't require breaking anything. A silence followed. A deep, confirming silence. From below the final resonance came. Not a pulse. Not a vibration. A single structured acknowledgement. Complete. And the glow beneath Adrian shifted again. Not brighter. Final. Like a decision had been accepted. Eleanor took a slow step back. This is the last moment before full access, she said quietly. Adrian didn't look at her now. He was staring at the floor. At the system beneath him. At what was about to be inherited. And somewhere deep under Blackthorn Manor. Something enormous responded one final time. Not with movement. Not with sound. But with readiness. And the floor beneath Adrian began to open. The floor did not collapse. It parted. Cleanly. Precisely. As if Blackthorn Manor had never been solid at all, only layered. Adrian stood at the exact center of the glowing pattern as the marble beneath him separated into controlled segments. Each piece moved downward on its own invisible mechanism, revealing a vertical descent into structured darkness. Not a pit. Not a hole. A passage. Engineered. Deliberate. Alive with faint lines of light running along its inner walls like veins remembering function. Eleanor's voice cut through the silence instantly. Adrian, don't follow it down. He did not move. But he was no longer fully in control of whether he stayed or went. The air around him felt different. Heavier. Aligned. Like gravity itself had shifted its priority. From the guests behind them came panicked voices. This is not a basement. That's not architecture, there's no support system. But the words faded as the structure beneath continued to reveal itself. A vast vertical chamber extended downward farther than any known foundation should allow. Layer after layer of engineered space unfolded as if the manor had been built on top of something already complete. Adrian stared downward. And for the first time since this night began, he saw what the system truly was. Not a vault. Not a room. A layered containment network stretching beneath Blackthorn Manor like an inverted city. And at its center, something was waiting. Not rising anymore. Already present. Eleanor stepped closer to the edge again, her voice lower now. This is what I tried to stop you from completing. Adrian finally looked at her. Completing what? Eleanor hesitated. Then spoke with absolute certainty. The activation sequence your father started and never finished. A pulse echoed upward from below. Stronger than before. Not shaking the structure. Defining it. The chamber responded like a living system now fully awake. And then, a shape became visible again. Far below. Not moving toward them. Simply revealed by proximity. A massive geometric structure suspended in the central void of the containment system. Surrounded by layered rings of light that rotated slowly, like calibration cycles finally completing after decades of delay. Adrian's voice dropped. What is that? Eleanor answered quietly. The core node. Pause. The reason the East Wing was sealed off from every official record. The air in the dining hall changed again. Every guest felt it. A pressure shift. As if the manor was no longer holding them inside, but holding something else inside with them. Then the structure below emitted a final resonance. Not loud. Not violent. Final. And every line of light in the entire system converged once more. But this time, not on Adrian's position above. On the core node below. As if acknowledging that the last requirement had been met. Eleanor's expression tightened. No, she whispered. Adrian turned sharply. What now? But Eleanor's eyes were fixed downward. Because she understood what had just happened. The system was no longer asking for permission. It had already accepted it. And from deep inside Blackthorn Manor's hidden structure, the core node began to activate. Slowly. Completely. Irreversibly. And the final sound that rose through the chamber was not mechanical. Not structural. But unmistakably intentional. A system-wide acknowledgement echoing through every layer of the manor. As if something buried for generations had finally said, we are ready. And then the light beneath Adrian went out completely. Not failure. Not shutdown. Completion.